Lacan Public. And the next hour, we're going to talk about another book that's published by the Colorado Analytic Forum of the Lacanian Field called Actually Lacan, which is entitled. And I like particularly the actually, and so forth. So I'm not going to introduce Gabriella again because we did that this morning, but Gabriella, we're going to do something kind of really reverse, and we're here. She's going to introduce me.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to take a leeway to do that.
Yeah, whatever you want to
Since
say.
you're doing this at your own risk.
Right.
You know. So
I take risks.
Good. There must be a reason why.
Yeah, don't spend a lot of time on this.
Yes. So, you know, I have really no idea of, or at least I should speak in my first word here. Generally, we are not acquainted the same way academia is with Lacan, Freud, and such. Even philosophy, the way even we read philosophy is even very, very distinct from what I have heard here. So it's been refreshing, maddening in a sense, an awakening. So Carl, I met serendipity.
We met through another.
Through another that is, we could probably put a big O.
Yeah.
I don't know who she is.
Neither do I, really.
For you,
Yeah.
but she talked your ear off on a plane.
7 hours.
7 hours. 7 hours. So I received this strange email from a professor of DU who is inviting me to do this. I have never met this professor, and the only reference in common is a person I don't know.
Does it know you?
Right. Then what happened next is, of course, we've met, we hit it off pretty quickly, and after that, Carl became a member of our forum. So he is now participating in the forum and in the school. He is also a member of one of our cartels, to which, by the way, you're all invited to come in if that fits your schedule of interests.
We're reading this, right?
We're reading this. Well, that cartel is closed, but there's always new cartels coming up. Closed because of a matter of amount of people in a cartel. Then, after having introduced why is it that we all are here, thanks to this mysterious rose, which probably, I don't know, inhabits like your flower, which name is not Cifrage.
Well, but we also know that the rose is a rose.
Yeah.
You've heard that first?
Yes.
Now you've heard it.
So I'm going to do a very brief intro of who is publishing the book first, and then I will leave it to Dominique and Matthias to present Lacan. Yes, thank you. So the Colorado Forum of the Lacanian Field exists formally since 2010. It's a chapter of the International of the Forums of the Lacanian Field, which is an international association of Lacanians, basically. That has also its school, the School of Psychoanalysis. So Colorado is the local chapter of this, and we basically are dedicating our time to studying psychoanalysis, practicing psychoanalysis, questioning psychoanalysis, reading it, disseminating it, sort of like on the boat, less perhaps like what Sarah was bringing up, more in the sense of really bringing the plague. That is what we are after, nonetheless. Appetite, Matthias said earlier today. which I am very glad to hear in this space from, in a way or other, from all of us, a certain uh, feel that this environment is avid this now. Perhaps it wasn't the case when Lacan visited America. Huh? Now, the Clinical College of Colorado is one of our efforts to also disseminate and do sort of what Carl does in the university, which is this role of bridging the gap between academia and the community. So the Clinical College of Colorado is the first of its kind in the entire country, and the only one that I know of in the state that offers a Lacanian formation of 3 years that involves the study of the theory, the presentation of cases, the discussion of the position of the analyst, of its ethics, and trying to, from here, produce analysts. This is what we're after. And these ladies over here are all in that boat, in disseminating the plague as well. So, without, oh, yes? Oh, I thought you guys were going to say something. So the Clinical College of Colorado has a program of 3 years. We started last year. So we're about to finish our first year, and aims at anybody interested in psychoanalysis and in its practice. There is a possibility, we are actually now involving an optative, something you can choose into if you so desire, of an internship in the last year of the college, where you can either probably go to London and practice in an institution that is directed by an Argentinian who is an analyst who happens to be in London and works in what we could call transition houses for, well, here we speak of chronically ill patients. And also, we are in the midst of doing something very similar in Argentina, where you can be guaranteed that is going to be Lacanian as you get it. From that on, Matías and Dominique, I said earlier, are both part of our faculty. And I am very pleased that they actually, one day when we were having a faculty meeting in Argentina about October last year, like, yeah, what do you think if we come, when we come? Because at that point I had already received this mysterious email from Carl. I'm like, oh, well, it'd be nice if you guys could join in this conference. I mean, I have really no idea what this is, but hey, why not? So they came up with the idea of coming here with something written. So in a way, this book had the teleology, which is a word that Carl likes to use, of this event. And also, it's inaugurating a series. What you will find in this book is our desire. You will find our bet wholeheartedly on the fact that, as Matías was saying earlier, and as Stat repeated later, this works. The cause works. And it doesn't need much explanation. It just works. Can I have a mate, by the way? Thanks. Now I'm going to pass it on to these guys who actually did most of the work and the editorial work and all that jazz.
All right. That's nice. Well, in order to introduce this book, I think that it's important to say something first. That comes from which I really liked. As I said, I think you were very passionate, and that is something I like. And I must say this: we are not. I don't think psychoanalysis is in a battlefield towards how things are, to grasp the true meaning of how things are. I wouldn't say that is our task. we work with problems, we produce concepts, and that doesn't mean that we are in a battlefield with different discourses trying to reach the true meaning of things. The same as perhaps Deleuze can say regarding philosophy, there are problems, so there are concepts. Use those to work, and that's it. So I wouldn't support the idea of engaging into an imaginary battlefield without discourses. What I would say also is that Freud, and I think you can read that in a letter from Freud to Jung, when he said, "Oh, do you remember those good old times when we were going down the ship and we were bringing the plague?" What Freud didn't know is that with a small dose of a plague, you can make a vaccine, you call it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a cure. It's something that will prevent you from being ill. Because in a way, desire makes you ill. And anxiety can be the effect of those who perform, those who do, those who act. I have the same question as Tad has. Why the talking being prefers a huge amount of guilt instead of a small amount of anxiety? Luckily, I don't have an answer to this question, and that question, that problem, is why I have this job. Otherwise, I would be in another line of duty. So we have problems and we have concepts to work with those problems. Philosophy can have, I don't know, the problem of the other, the body, the self, the thought, philosophy itself, the being. And that is why those problems, you produce concepts, and the other way around, they affect their objects of study and all that. One of the two, I think, main concepts or notions that you will find in this book are desire and symptom, which are two concepts we use to work with. In an analytical way. It is not a guide, it is not a manual, it's just putting forward into the community a series of topics to be discussed, especially for those who have an appetite for the idea of becoming analysts, or for those who feel that what Lacan said and the effects of that can be helpful to your own trains of thoughts and what you consider are your tasks. What?
Well, I like what you said. Well, hi, we are presenting actually Lacan. Perhaps you just come in, so you didn't know. I was, while Matthias was talking, I was remembering a sentence of an Argentinian writer that died a few days ago, Eduardo Galeano. I don't know if you've read something about him. He passed away while we were here, so it was really just a few days ago. It's a very beloved writer for us. And well, we remember a couple of sentences of ideas that he wrote these days. One of these ideas, I will try to translate it, is something like this. They took everything, but they leave the world. saying mundo o palabra?
The left words.
He's saying the left word. I love that sort of poem because they didn't leave any word. What? They live in this book at least, but a world that produced effects. And that is, I think, what we are talking about, all these meetings, about the effects. Because we don't know that something has or hasn't happened until we hear from the effects. That's why we know, for example, in relation to what you were saying, that the unconscious exists because of the effects, not because we can see it with a microscope, for example. So in this line, these effects will be the ones that the book can produce in you, the readers. As I was saying in the last meeting, is the reader that make the punctuation, as we were recently talking just now, of the discourse of the writer, or the one that talks. So it's your punctuation that will make the text. In that sense, it's not by chance. In the text, we try to write about symptoms and desire as two manifestations that, how can I put this, that make some noise, that they are, that they speak and they speak loud. That's why when Gabi was talking about desire consequences as an author, I was touched by her words, because I see that. I see that in her, for example. We are here because of your enthusiasm. It's not because of super ego. It's not here. We want to be here. And I know that because when you talk about psychoanalysis, I want to hear and I want to talk. So that caused my desire. So the idea of producing a book for this, well, to bring to this moment, it's not just for this moment, but for keeping the dialogue with you when we are gone, we leave the world. It's with that aim to see if the desire can be caused, can be moved. And not only in the direction of the symptom, but also in another direction. That perhaps just when you were presenting your book, you talk about this triology, that's very well-known triology for those who have with Freud, inhibition, anxiety, and symptoms, or anguish, I would prefer, and symptoms. But there is also another thing where desire can find its path, that is the act, that we can find in the title, actually Lacan. That has a dimension, an instant, like a privileged instant, without anguish and without guilt. Well, I hope that will go through the text, that will appear in the text. And there is one other thing that is in this book, well, for me, this particular book, that is in between a book and a magazine, something like that, because the magazine has the particularity of being actual. That is the return. Apartado? Chapter of the book. We have the desire, the symptom, and the return. The return is a very peculiar thing in psychoanalysis, and is the thing that we work with. We were talking about this in the presentation that Gabby did this morning. Well, I suppose we are always talking about this. That is the thing that insists, that returns, that keep returning. So the question that we could ask is this: if return is always the same, if things return to the same place and leave us in the same place, or if we can find a difference in this return, if this new turn can make a difference. And I think that the only thing that, well, the only thing is a bit exaggerated, but one of the things that can make a difference is it's not by chance, then again, that we decided to write a book with other people that are not here today with us, but are here today with us at the same time. And it's the thing that inaugurates a field. So perhaps we can say in a very productive way, but we can say this, that is this why when an art movement, they make a manifesto, or why we can think that a new science was born when Newton wrote the formula of the gravity. So it's not the same if we write something that if we don't do this. So then we can rewrite, then we can rethink, or we can discuss. Perhaps this will happen when we hopefully receive your emails with questions and opinions and all that stuff. But I think this is one of the motors for this book, to write something about our desire, not in an autobiographic way, but in a theoretical and clinical way, so in a psychoanalytical way. Well, this is, I think, my idea of this book. Thank you.
Any questions, comments?
Yes.
So when you say writing in a psychoanalytic way, is that similar to how you were talking about Lacan writing as the analysand? Do you see yourself as analysand when you're writing in a psychoanalytic way or a theoretical way?
Yes, well, I hope that will happen. I don't know, but that depends on you, for example. I can't. It's not only my intention, as is free association. It's not just an intention. I want to free associate. Okay, and then I can't. I don't know. So that depends on the effect. Then again, but what I do know, because this I don't know. But what I do know is that we write about our clinic. That doesn't mean writing about the patient, clinical reference. It's not the same thing. We can do that too. Trying to, well, write about as Radman, as Freud did with Radman, for example. But it's not necessarily that writing about the patient or an analysand, sorry. Taking notice about the clinics with the difficulties that we found in clinics. So we are not psychoanalysts. We cannot do psychoanalysis if we don't do clinic. We will be doing something else. If I answer your question. Yes.
It's a different question, but I
Right.
noticed not only you were saying throughout the day, since you are reading the seminar on glass,
Oui.
you make a distinction between, or prefer to speak about anguish instead of anxiety. And I was just wondering if you could explain the difference, or the different connotations of the two concepts.
Okay.
So why and
Fish. Okay, so the term has been translated to Italian, to Portuguese, to Spanish, to French as anguish. And there is the option in English, if we are saying anguish, to not say anxiety. Now, Strachey translated angst as anxiety. Melanie Klein developed a whole sphere of her theory with this particular choice, anxiety. So that in object relations in general, that's sort of the more common word. Now, is it the same? We had this debate to begin the cartel, in fact, a couple of weeks ago. And Carl was in disagreement with us. Carl was saying, well, when I think of angst, I'm thinking of anxiety. I'm thinking of, for me, angst is anxiety, it's not angoisse, or anguish, sorry. Anguish is an instant, is an affect. Anxiety has more the feel of something that is linked to time in a different way, so almost like in an anticipatory manner, like in the phobic stage, for example, which from Matthias. So there is a sense of anxiety that conveys a relation not only to time, but also to an object that is not precisely the object of anguish. To me, at least, there is a distinction here. This is something that we are still in conversation, at least in the midst of the cartel. But the question is, why has it been translated otherwise everywhere? And in English, again, we find an exception. How is it that English manages to do this time and time again? I wonder about this. And I wonder if anxiety is not something that could be more aligned with not awakening, in the sense that we were talking about, is to the sleepless, yeah? In the sense that anxiety allows us to, in a way, is not as much as an anguish conveys. Anguish conveys a realm of encounter with the real. Tat was saying earlier, Lacan would say, it's something, it's rather more of a background, not background is not a good word, more of a true affect, where anxiety is not necessarily. And we looked it up. What did we decide?
About what?
I don't remember anymore what we looked up. Daphne is not here to remind us. But we looked up the difference in the code, yeah? So we went to...
We looked at the etymology of the word.
I looked it up, and it was?
Well, it's narrowness, constriction.
Yes.
As in the German eng.
Uh-huh. Right.
Which means narrow.
Yes.
So it's and I brought up claustrophobia.
Right. See, but well, perhaps this is a question that we can continue to talk about. But as far as I know, it is really curious that in the only time where angst is anxiety is in English, huh?
Yeah, probably you're right. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. But I think your answer is interesting because when I understand you correctly, you link anguish to affect, which is more momentary,
Yes.
let's say, and you link anxiety to duration. Right.
Duration, in as much as it's constant, you mean?
As much as it's constant.
Ah. Mm.
Can I add something?
Sí, sí.
I don't know if this is an answer because I'm thinking this while we are talking, but difference between affections and feelings. I'm trying to translate what I think in Spanish into English, so I'm not sure. Please correct me. Affection as something that divides the subject, that is already divided, but punctualize that division. Anguish will be as an affection, something shows the subject in its division. It's understandable. And a feeling, as anxiety can be, perhaps it will be something more that we can put a cuenta del show.
On account of the ego.
On account of the ego, as can worry you but doesn't divide you. So I can be with a little bit of anxiety before this meeting, but the anguish is that point where you are worthless. Worthless.
Yeah.
Then we can talk about, oh, last night I was anguished because whatever. But it's that moment of division. So that's why you were telling, I just now don't remember if it was this morning or last night. Everything is like a huge meeting where we see each other a lot now. But you were talking about that moment where the subject is divided by the anguish. Is not a very good moment for the free association. And that moment pass, then we can associate about that anguish. So as an affection shows the division of the subject, and the anxiety as a feeling, it goes through another path. I don't know if that's a good answer.
And I would also add the language to say it with Lacan. If I say language, everybody understands what I'm saying. The French term for that. It has repeatedly shown a very complex relationship towards its own concept. Kierkegaard wrote the concept of anguish or anxiety, or angst, I assume, would be the word he used, or the word that used Kierkegaard. That Lacan, in what is known as the 10th seminar, is and was. After that, we have the 4 fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis. I think that also in Langois, you will find this idea of Lacan that it's not with the signifier that we can put our fingers on the real. We analysts promote an epistemic use of the anguish. In a way, as a signal, and this comes from Freud, signal anguish or angst. And with Lacan, as a path towards the real. But we must insist here that clinically, the compass is not anxiety or anguish, is the symptom. That takes you to the real in the sense of the real that concerns a singular talking being, not just the real, but
It's
someone's real. What is that concerns the talking being intimately and is appearing as anguish. So this very strange relationship between anguish and words, or anguish and its concept, I think it prevails in this problem of translation. So I wouldn't put it on the account of English, I would put it on the account of anguish itself.
only in English, though.
Only in English.
The problem remains, but in other languages, the translation did not have that issue.
Well, they seem to be a little more stubborn here. Yet enthusiastic.
Comes with it, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Two sides of one coin.
Yeah, sure.
I would think that anguish is in regard to time is something that has happened, over something that has happened, or anxiety would.
Or may never
I
happen.
hope you're not talking about us.
In that case, anxiety would be the better. In that case, anxiety would be the better translation.
Yeah,
In terms of anticipating.
right,
But
right.
here in
But
the
see,
news,
we're all about the effects, yeah?
and the anticipation is actual. You know, the same as you can never. There is never a false alarm. It's always true. The affect that you feel, perhaps the relationship of that as a sign, it's a problem of reference. But the alarm is always true. That's one of the things of the actuality of anguish is it's not that we can't reject it. The actuality of anguish. Yeah.
I was just, I'm thinking about what you mentioned about being a better translation, anxiety. From a French perspective, I know that we have two very distinct words, angoisse et anxiété. Like in English, anguish,
and in Spanish.
anxiety, ansiedad y angustia. And I've always thought of those two words being very different. So I don't see them as one replacing another. They just have two different meanings in two different places, depending on what is happening. So it seems, and maybe it's a linguistic facility that to see really the two differences. And I'm curious also in German if you do have two words that are very distinct, but that have an origin of angst.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Oh, well,
but,
Now I'm getting lost in translation.
No, but Freud is usually speaking about. And yes, would be that in German you don't have to distinguish and find another language. It's probably where the problem starts. Like the problem, there's like a differentiation between fear and anxiety.
I'm sorry, what distinction?
Between fear and anxiety, for example. What would be the German?
Well, yeah, we mentioned it the other day. I mean, angst and furcht.
Yeah, fear.
I mean, but that
But that's
distinction is
different
pretty
from
much
anxiety.
equivalent to, I'm not thinking linguistically, I'm thinking philosophically. And again, I'm going back to a sort of inaugural moment, a moment for me that is always as Lacan would say, citing German, "Wie du zu finden," always to go back and find that. And that would have been when I was 20, my junior year in college, when Sartrean existentialism was kind of at its height of popularity and so forth, that we would show up at the student union late at night looking very anxious and wearing black berets. The text we were reading at the time was Sartre's Nausea. Nausea is a very interesting book. I don't know, within the literary galaxy, if it's, certainly not anything people read a lot. Although I understand there's a Sartre revival going on, that's what I've been told. You told me that's right. You told me that's going on in Europe, there's a Sartre revival. But Sartre's whole notion of nothingness, being in nothingness, and that kind of experience of nothingness, and the insubstantiality, and the sense of the sort of abysmal unreality of what we call the real and so forth. That's the conception that I remember Sartre, improving to a certain extent on Heidegger, brought into the conversation that Heidegger had established in the 1920s and so forth. So temporalization, yes, temporalization of anxiety, it's very much tied to temporalization, but is it tied to temporalization in the sense of time moving in a certain direction? To talk about temporalization in terms of the impossibility of temporalizing. If you're going to
Except if you're an obsession.
Well, you may be fearful. I mean, I think another thing is and I've mentioned before, I'm very much taken with the documentary, the American documentary maker Ken Burns, because of the way in which he deals with historical periods, and he gets into, the real the psychology, the affects of the people who lived through this experience, and he does this through, kind of oral interviews with them or reminiscences, quoting from letters they've kept in family archives and so forth. It's very powerful stuff. But the most powerful of the documentaries I've seen 4 of them now, is on World War II. Because he talks about the soldiers in the Pacific, in the jungles, you think, well, war is hell, and therefore it's horror. But the one thing that comes across in all these GI experiences from that period of time, let alone appreciating, how horrible it was, and what a ghastly war that was. Here are people that, you can see why an Albert Camus would emerge from that, to talk about an absurd universe. But the way in which there was a sense of a kind of, there seems to be a loss of temporalization in the experience of war. It's like there's no end in sight, and there's no goal. You take a hill, you kill, 10 of the enemy, but the war is going to go on, and the kind of goal directed that generals think about, or politicians, it's like that doesn't really matter to the GI. So it's like you're kind of in this world of floating. It's not a world of fear, because the shells and the shrapnel is going on everywhere around you. And you say, okay, if it hits me, it hits me, that sort of thing. But this sense of the insubstantiality of your world, that's very Sartrean. And I'm just wondering if that's some way to get, that's the way I understood. And of course, philosophy, steeped in this, sort of existential, psychoanalysis that was before we'd ever heard of Lacan. I don't think Lacan had even been translated in those days. I don't think he even published actually in those days. There's something, it's not easy to get anxiety. It's not easy to get at it. It's not easy to say, okay, now we've kind of wrapped it up. We've boxed it up, and presented. We can't do that. And I know Lacan's not trying to do that. I'm just starting to read. Yeah. It's probably not proper for the person who just finished talking for 5 minutes to say we're out of time. But just one more quick question or comment, and then we're going to have, in terms of the way we're slated to move here. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, then we want to thank our presenters.
The book is outside and you can find it